All right, so it looks like we're finally live. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining this second talk of Akwan Center for Holistic Learning. Since we are facing a global challenge, it means we need a global discussion so that hopefully whatever we are going through now will bring us into a better future if we start a cross-border conversation and cooperation in different fields, and education is definitely not an exception. And this is why I'm very happy to welcome here tonight with us Gabriele Telvidita from Lithuania, Alice Di Lauro from Italy, and Pega Zoe from Iran. And unfortunately, there is also Hamza Asbi, who was supposed to join us from Jordan, but it looks like he had some health issues today, so he apologizes for any inconveniences and for not being able to be with us tonight. But anyhow, we hope that you will enjoy this conversation today with us. So we encourage you to comment under the live video that you're seeing on Facebook. Feel free to ask any questions also to our guests. You can address the question by name to the person, or just post a general question and we will make sure that our guests receive it by the end of the talk and hopefully answer it. So before we go ahead with discussing the questions we wanted to discuss today, I would like to invite you for a round of self-introduction, a little bit about yourself and the work you're doing, and yeah, just a quick round of introductions, and we'll start with Gabriela.
Hi, everyone. It's really good to be here. Thank you, Christina, for gathering us, from different parts of the world. And it's really amazing how the global talk on things has started, on economy primarily, but education has to follow. So thank you very much for bringing this topic to all of us. And my name is Gabriela. I'm from Lithuania. So I'm sitting here in Lithuania and, getting the evening darkness falling on us. And today was the first day of our therapy center reopening after the quarantine, or the quarantine is still happening, but we have a permission to open up. And the therapy center is for the children and families who have various developmental difficulties. Personally, I'm a social worker with a background from psychology, been in the field for almost 15 years, and now super excited for new challenges. Also working with technology globally with sensory issues and sensory technology, and also in the Middle East, so which is super, super interesting. So happy to answer the questions, share, and hear from Alice and Pega.
Thank you, Gabriele. So maybe we can just go ahead to Alice introducing herself, and then Pega.
Okay, nice to meet you, Christina and Gabriele, Pega, and nice to meet you all. My name is Alice, and I'm from Italy. I am an educator, an artist, and a philosophical practitioner. In 2018, 2 years ago, I founded an experimental educational project here in Italy by Lake Garda, and Christina was part of it for the first year. And I'm sorry for my poor English. It's because Christina left 1 year ago. So yeah, I have less occasions to practice it, but I'm very happy to be here. So this reality I founded involved about 40 children aged 3 to 10 years old and their families. For many years, I have been performing as a tightrope walker, funambula in Italian. And this is a symbol of my educational approach with children. Presence, an attitude of presence, openness, vulnerability, attention, and the balance between celebrating the present moment I'm living with them and leading them consciously towards a common goal. So in my daily work, I accompany their natural learning process. I trust their wisdom. I follow their own special creativity. and I co-build with them the direction and the shape of their researches in the field of knowledge. So that's all.
Thank you very much, Alice. And indeed, actually, you brought into our attention an important point, which I forgot to thank you for in the beginning, which is accepting to do this talk in English. Unfortunately, which is not like a native language to any of us. And unfortunately, for now, it's more or less one of the very few common languages until we create a new one, maybe more inclusive. So, Pega, would you care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. First, thanks for your invitation. I'm really happy to be with you all guys. And as you said, I'm Pega, and I'm from Iran. And I'm a facilitator of Philosophy for Children's program. And it's been something around 6 or 7 years that I'm working in this field. And also I'm philosophical practitioner, where I think, Christina and I met. And I have been working with children from different age range, and from pre-elementary school to high schools. And right now I'm working with second and third grade of elementary school students. And just that, I think it's enough.
So, one of the first things I wanted to get into was understanding a little bit the context of the measures that were taken in each of your countries. Because although every context in every country is different, but it's true that a lot of the measures that were taken have something in common and intersect in some way. So it would be nice to hear a little bit about that. Since Hamza is not here with us today, I wanted to chip in for a starter that, for example, in Jordan, since the lockdown started, mostly all education moved online and very quickly. And it was challenging, but also had some beauty, and a lot of discoveries were made during this period. So it will be interesting to hear from you, Gabriele, and then maybe from Alice and Pega in the same order that we did just right now. How was it for you in Lithuania? What were the main measures that were taken at the beginning of the quarantine lockdown in terms of education?
First of all, probably I would like to, take a small separation in terms of the formal education and the non-formal education, or the therapeutic support. It's probably a third path. And since I'm mostly in the therapeutic support and consultations and psychological help, I noticed immediately, well, because it's my line of work, that the formal education kind of grasped itself pretty quickly, because the force is really big. The human resources are huge, and it's a big part of the state. So of course they tried to do everything that they could. The private sector of education managed much faster. Clearly, no surprise. The governmental sector of education took 2 weeks off, during which they did the best they could, and they carried online. So that part went pretty smooth, I would say. Now, everything else, the non-formal education, they did what they could. The psychological support for neurotypical children and families was also mainly private. So we got a lot of content and input from private sector psychologists and support. And the last, yet of course not the least in the society, or it should not be the least, but the last was the children and families with disabilities or difficulties that were helped, or I would say not helped. And there we have an issue. So a quick overview is this, and the issue was clearly that I would say that in the mainstream talk, in the political approach of the pandemic, in the journalists, media, this group of society was not touched. So of course, then the specialists and the professionals were kind of not, they weren't sure, are their voices needed? Do they need to be heard? Do they need to raise any issues? Do they need to talk publicly, or do they need to try and find a private way into private lives of families? And so that was, kind of an interesting point. And the last probably thing that I want to mention, we did a survey 2 weeks into the quarantine. We did a family survey, how they feel and how their kids feel. And I have to say, I don't know, it will be interesting to hear in other countries. I have to say that after 2 weeks in quarantine, the families were very optimistic. They thought that they can handle anything. And I have to say, because these families which have difficulties or disabilities, they usually are quite strong normally, they already are used to things to manage. So 2 weeks into quarantine, they felt like, okay, we can handle it. We can make a pause in therapy. Maybe we need some support, emotional, psychological support for the parents, but otherwise we can handle it. Now, as the quarantine expanded, and now it's been almost 2 months in Lithuania, we can feel that families are calling us and saying, listen, we need to do something. It's serious now. So you see, it depends on the time where you are in the quarantine, and people are always more strong and optimistic in the beginning. Later, they fade with strength and things. So yeah, we'll have to find a path which will probably try to put in some online stuff and live meetings. So we'll have to find a balance.
Well, what you're saying, Gabriele, brought to my mind the issue of inclusivity and accessibility, and I think it has been a global issue also, somehow cross-border from what I've seen and observed. Also here in Jordan, the question of accessibility to this online education or to whatever support people are getting that is online. It was widely discussed how inclusive it is in the society. And it's not really a surprise, because somehow crises, they bring out to the surface whatever was always there but not really addressed, but it brings it in a harsh and very open way. And this takes me to Alice and to Italy. Italy, as you've probably been following, it had a lot of space in the international media for the size of the pandemic that hit it, and the incapacity also of the state to handle and to take care of all the people who were touched by the pandemic. And I'm sure that this also took a toll on education. So Alice, although you are more from the alternative scene of education, it would be great if you can tell us a little bit more about the formal sector and the so-called non-formal, let's say in your case, half formal, half non-formal.
Of course. So public school in Italy is like a big bureaucratic dinosaur that was already facing a big crisis. So all the fragility of this system came up thanks to the lockdown. All the things that didn't work went worse. And first of all, the possibility of this authentic relation of trust and support between teachers and the scholars, that was already compromised. In general, it went worse. I am connected with a network of teachers and leaders of many public schools that want to change, to improve the system, and I have listened to many testimonianze, many of these problems that came up. Public school was also a big children parking for parents who work. So the situation is that parents and children are at home, and as Christina said, the problem of the social inequalities have deepened. They were already there, and this situation showed it. In my context, it's different because the children had many resources from the beginning. For example, the modality of talking and having dialogue, giving space to others, and being very critical and open to any situation. The children were very curious. They took initiative and they started asking themselves what was happening. They were very curious about other children's home and objects, and wanting to show their objects. So the first 2 weeks, there have been a lot of excitement. Then we started working a lot in a more psychological level because they felt alone, and they needed to be helped in reorient themselves, the vision of the world, and an understanding of what was happening.
But it now, while you were talking, it came to my mind that at the end, this cultivating a critical approach and openness with the children on the long run, it can really equip them for life. And it's been a hypothesis that was there on the table for a long time, and looks like, even if in quite an unfortunate situation, but looks like it came forward, that it really makes sense to maybe have a different approach to education, because children are, in that case, better equipped maybe to handle life and reality. And let's go back now to Pega. Since Pega, you are working in the formal sector, tell us a little bit about Iran, because Iran also was one of the countries that were hit very hard. Did the government react from the very beginning, or did it take time like they did in Lithuania? How was it for you?
Actually, as Gabriela said, we have to divide Iran's educational system into two parts, and private and public schools. And from the first days of that issue, private schools started making videos and doing different things in order to be in connection with students. But it took something around 2 or 3 weeks for the government to make a new platform and to make the access for students to be connected with their teachers. And but it had definitely lots of issues. The platform was new and nobody used it before. Teachers had to make accounts from their schools, so you know the process of making these accounts are really crazy, and it was really hard at first, and still it doesn't work very well. But private schools started working on and using different applications, and they had some online classes with students. And I was thinking about dividing it into two categories. The first one was technical issues, that you know, the access to electronic devices. We were not prepared for that. I mean, some of parents had the smartphones or laptops and these things, but at the same time, children wanted to use them. So it was somehow a really big issue doing their assignments and getting online, and at the same time, parents want to do their job at home and these things. And also internet access. It's not, we cannot say that a huge amount of people got access to internet connection. For example, I'm working with a labor of children. They don't have access to that. So how we gonna, we didn't know how we have to manage it at first. And the other category that I'm going to say about that issue was about mental and teaching problems. At first, students were really excited, and they thought that this is the dream that came true, that being home and doing nothing. And it was really interesting for them at first, but little by little, they got bored of it. And they were not really interested to participate in any kind of activities that we try to create for them. And it was somehow really a big issue for my job too, because in my job, we have to be at the same atmosphere. We have to be in a cycle. We have to communicate and see each other. So it was really hard, because even with online sessions, it was impossible, because, for example, I wanted to work on my students' listening skills. There were lots of things to distract them, and it was just like what I'm doing. And I've experienced the worst classes of these years that I had classes with students. But I think I'm going to mention this positive challenge for us, that I've experienced that my students understood the meaning of being in connection with human being, and it had a positive effect on their emotions. Before this quarantine, all of them knew that they have access to us as their teachers and classmates, and every day they are going back to their schools and they are going to meet them. So it wasn't matter for them. But after that, they could understand the feeling of being with each other, and even having fight with each other, but in person, just touching each other and doing something like that. So I think it was the positive part.
Well, I've been hearing this a lot. Also, Hamza, I know that he wanted to focus because I asked him before if there was something he wanted me to say on behalf of him. So one of the points that he wanted to bring up today was that online learning and online education might bring a lot and might be an opportunity, but it can never replace real connection and real interaction, because it's a very important and crucial part of the growth of a human being.
Yeah.
I would like to go back to you, Gabriele, and if you would like to tell us a little bit about how much the parents, from your perspective and from your context of work, how much the parents were involved before the lockdown and before the pandemic in the education of their children. How did it, and do you see any differences during the quarantine? I know that you set up some support groups for parents, and you were trying to help them do the therapy work at home, if I'm not mistaken. So can you tell us a little bit about the role of parents, how it's changed, and tackle also a little bit, what did you do to be able to move your work online, basically?
All right, sure. So the thing is that the parents' involvement is, it goes up and down, or it depends on the situation in the family, or it depends on which stage they are in the therapeutic process. So we cannot say like stably, that it was down before the pandemic and it's up now. However, we can see a much more subtle changes. For example, the parents who were very interested in the therapeutic process before the pandemic, the ones who wanted to learn, the ones who wanted to discover, they took a step further, and I think they started trying to practice it, which is a very interesting thing. The ones who thought that the therapists have to do their job and I'm just going to sit and read a book or take a nap or enjoy, the time off, they also took more or less a step forward, and they realized that they need certain knowledge. They need certain, tips and certain ways to be with their child, they naturally got frustrated because suddenly, you know, you have your child 24/7 and you understand you need to teach him something because it's not holidays, even though it feels like holidays. I loved what Pega said, like the first few weeks, it was like, you know, an improvised holidays, but then it got boring and difficult and you had to put in some content. So those parents, they decided that, okay, now we need to learn something, which is, it's very good, but it's you know, urgent. And when things happen urgent, it's always very difficult to set some I don't know, schedule and some topics and to make it proper. But what we tried to do, we tried to give small online half-an-hour classes, or like not classes but discussions on particular topics, so that it wouldn't be suddenly a whole methodology that we're introducing, but particular topics. And these topics, you won't believe me, but they are so like, you know, down to earth, I would say. For example, how to establish a real connection with your child. I know, right? Sounds interesting, but yes. How to make sure that you spend 20 minutes that are worthwhile with your child, not while you're cooking, not while you're watching TV, not while you're answering a phone with one hand. These simple topics, they made sense. And then the parents decided, okay, it's not that difficult, right? It doesn't sound difficult, you know, how to establish a connection with your child. We all think we have one. But then they sit and listen and they might find something new. You know, how to read your child, for example, which is also seems simple, but once you start doing it. And how we know that this is a topic is when we ask, why did the child behave this way or that way? And the parents say, well, I don't know, maybe that or maybe that. Then we understand that, okay, then the parents don't read the child. So simple things like that, not pushing, not saying that the parents don't know, that, you know, they're horrible parents because they got bored of their child, which is completely normal. The support, the positivity that, okay, you can do this, you know what, just go for a walk and this is already better than anything else. So you're a good parent just because you're trying. So simple things like that. So I wouldn't, you know, to kind of summarize this, I wouldn't say that before pandemics people didn't care or parents didn't engage. They did, but the urgency was different. Now they realize that, okay, now I need to like put things in order, put things in my shelf in the head and really use them. So I think I would say that that's the biggest difference, you know?
Yeah, and it makes sense because suddenly you're 24/7 at home with your children. And for some parents, it was really, and for children, was a discovery, like, whom do I live with, you know? We've been discussing this a lot with my colleagues. Really, we like, suddenly people are discovering interests of their children or sharing their own interests, or trying to come up, maybe not methodologically, maybe not with a clear intention why I am doing one or another activity, but they just feel that there is no other way because, you know, there are those 24 hours we have to stand each other. It's difficult for everyone. So let's minimize our expectations and support each other in this as much as we can. And Alita, actually, I'd like to hear a little bit from you. Since what Gabriele brought in now, one of the concepts she mentioned was a little bit related to presence. And also, as Pega said earlier, because in some part of your work, some part of your work is similar to Pega's work, and she faced that challenge of handling such type of activities. So if you could briefly describe to us how you were working before the pandemic, so that people who don't know you and the beautiful reality you co-established, they can have a little idea, and maybe how you adapted that type of work into the online space and what was the response of the children and the parents. Because I've seen that you've done some really amazing work online. So please tell us a little bit more about all those things.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for your reflection, Gabrielle and Pega, and I share them. I find a lot of similarities. in the process I've been going through with the children. Before the lockdown, one of the main instruments which are part of the learning process is sharing in circle. So this creating the space and time to arrive here, to choose to be together and learn together. And this part we we managed to put it online because in the first weeks we gave more and more space to social interaction and to this building of a safe area of sharing of feelings and stories. I gave more space in the first weeks. Then we were starting literally lab. So the school, the class in the last month had became like editor home. So children were creating stories together, alone, creating books, building paper. And so in this new context, all the material was at school. So what happened was that we had to find a solution to work together, even if everything was at school, their books, their material, it was everything at school. And we couldn't move. So we started to, I started to propose them weekly missions related to this work. And it's interesting to notice how the parents react. As Gabrielle said, the parents who were already before present and interesting and wanting to know more about this learning process that was going on at school, they gave a great help to their children, also a contribution. So we put together these creations, putting together the voice of the children, narrating the story that they invented, and the drawing. And this, then we created a YouTube channel, and we reached other children from other parts of Italy. So it was, this was great. Nevertheless, I experienced also the problem of distraction and boredom, and of course inequality, because the children who were less followed by their families had more difficulties. So so it was really like a tightrope walker job to be able to catch all the signals, but through a video, and to stop everything if there was something happening in the child, because here you don't have the occasion to touch. You have 45 minutes, and so frustration. But then the constants of the work, like we meet now 3 times a week, gives also opportunity to go back to what happened. For example, the meeting before, we worked already in frustration of the children, because when they want to have a word and they have to wait. We did a great job in the last 2 years, and so it was a help for the online process.
Yeah, I imagine the importance of listening to the child and making sure that the child is in the center of the education process has always been very important. But I think in these times it's even more important, because not only adults are facing the unknown, also the children are facing the unknown. But the adults might be a little bit sometimes better equipped to express, at least, or to share. As for the children, it can come in the most unpredictable ways, and it's so important to be there, present, to embrace all that and see what you do with it. And I imagine that through a screen, it can be quite a job. It's kind of doing a double job. Pega, you mentioned when you were talking earlier this problem that you had of distraction and other difficulties also related to accessibility and stuff. Did you manage yourself or maybe your colleagues or together to bring any, like to come up with any small steps that actually helped a little bit improve the quality of what you're suggesting and what you're exchanging with the children?
Yes, actually, we discussed to have separated groups on WhatsApp for our students in order to give them the accessibility to send their homeworks and their assignments whenever they want to and be in touch with us. It was the first step that we took besides Skype online sessions and as Gabrielle said, 30 minutes a day for their homeworks with their teachers. So it was the first step that we took, and it really worked. But again, about my class, I just had to say that even if my students think for 1 minute about my stimulus, it's enough for me because I couldn't do anything. Because just imagine second grade girls go online, it's really hard for them to manage to talk and to communicate. So that was the thing that I told my manager that this is the only thing that I want. 1 minute of thinking for the stimulus that I sent for them. Yeah, so, and also we had another, based on what Gabrielle and Alicia said, I think all of us were dealing with something just like competition with social media and all the interesting, for example, games and different things that our students get access to. You know, we had to create something really different to make them to pay attention to it. Because, for example, if I at first I send them just, for example, 2 photos of a book, and I thought that they would read it and they will think about it, and it didn't happen, you know. And the next step was just like making a video, making the new characters to read it for them. And I think it was the creative idea to ask them to give me assignments instead of me giving them assignments. And it was really great because they wanted to take revenge of me. And they sent me a lot of questions. It was so, but the feedback was great. At least they thought about the questions to make challenges for me. So, yeah.
This makes me super curious about what kind of assignments did you get?
One of them was painting, and I'm terrible in painting. And just imagine some of my students asked me to paint the whole story for them, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to try and do my best. And when I sent it to her, I was just like, sorry for my bad painting, I'm not a painter. So yeah, it was one of them. Really creative questions was the other assignments that I got, which I was just like, how I'm going to answer that question. So yeah, it was interesting.
Well, you know, what you were saying now brings me to Alicia, and I experienced this sometimes also when we were together in the first year of the reality she founded, that you just sometimes realize that you're so helpless as an educator, and that you might think that you have a lot of different tools and ideas, but sometimes they just don't work. So exactly the same way how you felt helpless in front of those assignments, children often feel that way in the classrooms, even if we offer the best supportive environment possible, even with the best intentions you can have in the world. They're just not there because you're not speaking the same language, and it's so hard to accept it. But it also is eye-opening, and it brings me back to the importance also of a constant learning process that happens on both sides. It's very nice what you just brought up. And since we are here on a positive, and also, by the way, talking about Jordan, also What's Up Here was one of the king apps, very popular among teachers. A lot of teachers, even before the government put on national platforms for formal education, where basically a child would go into a virtual room that looks like a classroom, and then they have the teacher in front of them. Which was very challenging for the same reasons you just mentioned, Pega, earlier, that it's not the same. Doing stuff online and doing them offline is not the same, but this understanding was not there until it was tried. So what a lot of teachers did is because they didn't want their students to miss classes, they were teaching them via WhatsApp with the support of the parents. And was like, at the beginning, it was some individual maybe initiatives, and then some teachers were coming together also and having their WhatsApp groups where they discuss the challenges they're facing and stuff. So there's been a lot of work. Some of it was just trial and error, so a lot of it will probably go into the garbage, but also a lot of it can open space not only for discussion but for action in the future. And this brings me to the point that I wanted to discuss with you. So Gabriela, what are the main things, and this is a question to all of you, if you don't mind, what are the main insights maybe that you personally as a social worker and a therapist are taking from this journey of the pandemic that is not over, but it's you are hosting people again, so it's kind of a little bit partly back to normal. But what would you take with you for a radical change in our understanding of education and its functioning?
I think it has quite a few dimensions, right? I mean, apart from the whole philosophical understanding of the formal education, which I'm not gonna go into because I think it's a separate discussion. What is a formal education and why do we concentrate so much on eliminating certain holistic parts of the education? For example, the environment is still a major issue, like sitting in the classrooms. I mean, I'm super happy to hear Alice's way of alternative. It's still called alternative learning or alternative teaching. Even though this is the teaching where you take in the holistic approach of the environment and the idea of following the child, currently is one of the therapeutic methods, right? So in therapies, there's this one of the methods is following a child. But from what you say and from what Pega described and Christina, you kind of mentioned that sometimes we feel like we have a lot of tools, but we then get lost in we don't know how to reply to the child. But the answer is very simple. You follow the lead of the child. The child will also show you in one way or another how he or she wants to be approached. And I'm not going to say taught, because we need to find an understanding that every single part of life matters in the development. It matters how your brain functions for you to understand math, and it matters how your brain functions for you to understand, I don't know, the different materials on the tactile perception. So as soon as we, as the world, will start moving from this clearly formal education, we sit on the hard, chairs and desks, and we raise our hand when we want to say something, and we say only things related to the subject, and we don't include our feelings or emotions or ability to communicate in certain subjects, then we still will be failing as the world. Or take it online, take it wherever you want. So I believe that this pandemic, and I actually unfortunately believe that there will be more of those one way or another, we need to start thinking about the wholesome approach to a children, to a child, to the family. Because as you mentioned, in Jordan, like, parents should help in teaching, and we had memes going around, like, parents, suddenly not teasing the teachers because they understood how tough is the teacher's job.
Or
So
suggesting that they should have a rise in payment after the pandemic.
exactly. So suddenly, the respect for the teacher's job rises because I need to do it, and I understand how and with my own child, which I'm supposedly, I know so well, and I can't sit and teach him for, a few hours. So so all these things, you need to understand that, okay, the division is not working very well for us. The clear division that, like, I teach math and only math, and if I'm not good at math, I'm not going to teach math or learn math, is not working for us very well. So the environment, the sensory stimuli that works for us every day, every minute, need to be taken into account much more seriously. And just to kind of finish the monologue that I'm doing, it's a shame that Hamza is not here, but I think what you said that he would say makes a lot of sense in this social connectivity. That's why I hate the term social distance or social distancing. It's physical distancing, but social connectivity. So that's one thing. The other thing is we need to learn to appreciate the social communication much more. Because now what we do is, we're going to see the other person. If we don't like this person, we're going to find another person that we like more. And, because we're always going to have people around us. No, we're not. When we get stuck in the environment that there's no people and just technology and input from media and stuff that we cannot have a communication with or conversation with, then we need to, start thinking, okay, oops, I miss people. And maybe I should have been better to people, or more interested in people. So this is a short vision of how I would see it,
Your monologue, Gabriele, was mentioned in a comment by one of our viewers, Arij Alia. She's a teacher, basically. She teaches teachers how to become teachers. And she's saying, wow, Gabriele, it's the learning goal when you were mentioning the importance of not dividing and the monologue.
And it's a global goal.
Yeah.
I don't think it, matters which background or culture or part of the world you are in.
Definitely. And this, again, I think that I really, truly, deeply believe in these days that we need to go not only cross ministries, not only cross sectors, but also cross borders. Because also from some of the comments I'm receiving now from my colleagues, people are saying, yeah, the challenges are very similar around the world. It's fascinating how similar they are. And it doesn't only apply to education. It applies to everything. So probably if there is more discussion and openness and less division in terms of who's better, the South, the North, who's well-equipped, who's not well-equipped, who's gonna save whom, but rather just open up and share all the experiences we have as humans in whatever small or big spaces we can create, I think that can bring real action on the ground that can have sustainable outcomes. Alice, what do you take with you to the future?
So I think that children not only are the leaders of our future, because it's them that will lead us, but actually they lead us. They are leading us. So our role is to give them space and trust. And what I experienced thanks to this change, we experienced together that they can lead other children, they can care other children. And so I fully take Gabriele's perspective about the value of this contact and communication between children, parents, and educators. One thing that is happening in these weeks is that I started to every night at 9 to tell stories to children. First, there were 10. Now they are 50 children from different parts of Italy. And in the beginning, I was telling a story, and the children were listening and then interacting with the tools of thinking dialogue and so on. After 2 weeks, these spaces are led by children, which gives space to others, which supports children who have problems in reading, and slowly these different children from different backgrounds, different parts of Italy, they are taking their space, and so I see not only a learning process together led by the children, but a healing process where our role as educators is to build and protect a space of openness, of care. And the communication with parents is crucial here. This lockdown has been an opportunity for the educational process to go into the houses, so and for the family system to come this side. It's a paradox because there is a screen, but for the first time, not only the parents can see what is happening in the class, but also the educator can see the system, the family system, and this is an opportunity to build a coherence together, to practice a language, and yes.
We have a viewer, Alicia, who says, what a great initiative, Alicia, talking about reading the stories at night. Pega, since you are, in my view, a non-typical educator within the formal education system, using a slightly different methods than what we were describing earlier, what do you see for the future? You can speak specifically about Iran, or you can go global, since we're seeing a lot of intersections here.
Actually, I'm going to make it general for all children all around the world. I think as educators, we know that everything is going to be changed in the future. Nothing is going to be just like past. So we have to enable our students to have different weapons. And I think that weapon is going to be the way that we teach them how to think. Because in this way, even ethics can become more pointable for them, and we might not experience such thing that we are experiencing right now. And also from the other perspective, I think if this thing is this coronavirus is going to stay with us for years and years, we have to teach our students to become their own teachers by using, I don't know, whatever we have. It's just an idea that we really need to enable them to be different, because they are going to be different generation after this pandemic thing.
Indeed, there has been a huge discussion saying that the children of today are dealing with this pandemic and this unusual situation. And in some way, in terms of technology, for instance, they're better equipped sometimes than their own teachers. So they are already enabled more than the adults that are trying to lead them. But the problem is that there is this stubbornness that I wouldn't listen to the child because my authority is unquestionable. So all this is under a huge question mark now, and I would add my voice to yours, Pega, and also I think if we could join your suggestion with what Gabriela was saying about also the importance of understanding how we feel and how we connect to others and to our feelings and to ourselves, and also the presence that Alicia discussed, and the space and the trust we can give to children to learn, teach, lead, and to show us how is the best way to approach not only them but reality. I think there can be some nice outcome out there in the world. If you don't mind now, I would like to share with you some of the comments and the questions that my wonderful colleagues Yazan and Reem have been sending me. So we have a comment from Dua saying, so look, I suggest if you want, I'm going to just go through the questions. If you hear a question that you would like to answer to, just write it down and then just go ahead for it. You choose your questions. So Dua is saying there are many challenges, but at the same time, online education was the way out for all the educational institutions and for some people a way to use their time wisely. Yes. And Arish is telling you, Pega, and also Gabriele, because you took also that point. Here as well, she means in Jordan, they like the vacation and staying at home. And it's true, but you know, we did some videos with the children, asking them a little bit to share with us how they feel about the lockdown and the quarantine. And several of them use the language of, I like these holidays, you know, and I like that I can do stuff easily and there is no rush. Because I'm still learning, but there is no rush, you know. And so we have a question here. How might we help parents and students adapt to remote learning while also using this moment to radically reimagine what we need our education systems to be? That's a huge question. Thank you, Arish. Then another question, how do you make distance learning available and equitable for all students, especially students with special needs? That's also an interesting question. Then we had another comment saying, true, my friend works in a public school and she said that many girls, their families have a limited resources. Yeah, it's again a question of accessibility. So there is also a question, someone is asking how we can estimate our children to continue learning. So probably I would assume that it's about ensuring the long-term learning. And another question, how were the challenges addressed to students of different nationalities, ethnicities, backgrounds, and languages? If any of you has a specific experience with that, that would be perfect. And then we have a comment saying, it all has to do with how a teacher plans the lesson. Planning to teach in a classroom is different. Online distant teaching has to be interactive. The secret is in grabbing students' attention, which you did perfectly well, Pega, with your assignments, the reverse rows. So is there anyone who'd like to start answering the chosen questions? Go ahead, please.
I can go. You know, I hear special needs and I think, okay, I have something to say. Not necessarily, but at least I find I want to feel quite close to this group of people, children generally in the world. So, which again is maybe an innovative approach by itself, because this field is also under a lot of stress and needs innovation terribly, just like formal education. And you know, it's a shame what Alicia was saying in the beginning, how Italy, you know, or Italian formal education is like a dinosaur that, you know, needs to change. And if you break down the education, a lot of pieces in it need to change. Approaches need to change. And when it comes to children with special needs, I strongly believe in integration. I strongly believe in inclusive learning. And that comes together with what I previously said about the environment, that it needs to, you know, it needs to acknowledge everyone and everyone's needs. It needs to be free enough to move around, even physically, mentally. And teaching kids with special needs, I would say, is more of a therapeutic process, more of a relation creation. So I loved what Alicia and Pega was saying, you know, how to engage children is to look, what Pega did initially with inviting children to give her tasks is not anything else than just opening up as a human being, right? Because we're used to having educators and teachers and therapists and older people as someone who, okay, I'm just this role, and you're not allowed to ask any personal question. You're not allowed to know who I am as a human being, but I want to know everything about you, right? How fair is that? How human contact is that? So what each of you, and I believe many teachers across the world, realized that even by sitting at home with my video, with my laptop, my children can see what paintings are on my wall, you know, and it's already cool and it's already fun. So it creates much more human-based relation that we need. And the parents need to feel that they are welcomed and invited as human beings, not as, you know, a specialist of something or a parent of someone. So the children need to also be taken into consideration as small human beings who have everything around them. And so a part of education needs to become more individualized, and a part of education needs to be more argumented, why it's there, how it benefits to the future of the child, how does it help to live a full life, which, you know, addresses all the needs and all the understanding of the world. So I think special needs is not that special if we take this approach. If we understand that education is both targeting individually, but also making it about all of us, inclusive and understood, and, you know, all of that.
Yes, and we have someone saying, yes, Gabriele, we can also get support from the community itself, of student volunteers, and even the students themselves for new ideas. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also support from I mean, currently the support from neighbors, in my eyes, is the best support you can get, right? So, you know, I wouldn't even say it's creative. It's old knowledge. We just forgot it, right? Like, it's very common.
Trying to outsmart ourselves. Alice, I know that you have to leave us soon. So would you like to answer any of the questions, or maybe leave a contribution, something you'd like to say before you go?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
It's a great pleasure to be with you and talking about these matters. I miss it, and I definitely want to to go on and to follow this wonderful initiative. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you for making it at this hour. I don't know what time it is now in Italy, but it is late also here. But, you know, we had to adjust for Ramadan timing. Thank you very much, and many hugs to you. And Pega, maybe you would like to answer some of the questions that were given, that were asked, sorry, or if there is something that you'd like to say on a final note.
I think the thing that I want to say is related to one of the questions. Right now, we have some informations, and we have experienced lots of things during this lockdown. And from now on, we can start researching and working on a different educational system with all the paradigms that Gabrielle mentioned, and which is necessary for our world right now. And for example, I cannot say it right now that we have to have this educational system like this, like that. It's impossible to say it like this. But as we all, as all human beings all around the world experience the same thing, so I think right now we can all make one same and united educational system for all kids. It's not just for specific country and for specific people with different background, with the same background. So I think right now we have to start. This is the only thing that I think it was related to one of the questions.
Yeah, I cannot agree more with you. At the end, we're all human beings with similar desires and similar fears and similar aspirations in life. And why not opening up more to be able to understand how we function, how we learn, and how we grow, so that the experiences are more widespread. Gabriela, would you like to say something for like as a final note of the conversation?
The final note, well, it's difficult to end, you know. It's such a, I mean, such a pleasure to hear different you would think it's a different you know, different country, different situation, and yet maybe it's our created bubble. I don't know, Christina, did you create a bubble out of us? Because
I hope not.
the same language, you know. I mean, not only literally, we do understand the need. And once you know, you mentioned that we still have teachers who think that their authority is you know, unquestionable. I do believe that we're naturally we're growing out of it, you know. And these things, unfortunate things like pandemics, it helps, you know, to grow out of this unquestionable understanding that I'm the best and nobody can, you know, ever challenge me, especially a child. So yes, this is a positive thing. Another positive thing is that we do need to pay more attention into our surrounding. And I say that not because I work with sensory technology, which is, you know, if you think about it, 10 years ago, people were saying, oh, you know, sensory stimuli is needed only for like special kids or disabled kids. No, it shows, the reality shows that all the kids need sensory stimulation, and you need to work around it, you know. So yeah, I would say we try to take positive things out of this mess. I would say that we don't really pay too much attention into sometimes not very smart decisions by the politicians, but we try to listen to this human connection and human understanding first and foremost. Then we put the system behind it. Then we see, you know, what needs to be formalized. But first of all, anything that we create needs to come from a genuine understanding between human beings, nothing else. So as you said, you know, we try to outsmart ourselves, and turns out we knew everything, you know, beforehand. We just needed to remember and listen.
Yeah, very true. Especially as you said, keeping education out of the hands of economy and politics as much as possible, so that it doesn't become a tool that is directed in one way or another. We have a comment saying we must work on integrating with all the systems in education, working as professional communities of practice all over the world. Couldn't be said better. Thank you so much. I had a huge pleasure. I was a little bit nervous before the talk, but it ended up being a super nice chat and actually catching up a little bit. Thank you for your time. And thank you for all the wonderful work that you have been doing. And also, I'd like to take the chance to thank all the essential people in the world who have been doing an amazing job, be it nurses, be it doctors, be it grocery stores workers, people cleaning the streets, everyone who was just part of this huge, amazing challenge that is not over yet. But thank you and thank them. And thank you also to all our viewers and commentators for this beautiful, beautiful interaction today. See you hopefully soon in our upcoming talks on our page for now, unfortunately, until we can actually meet in a physical space, hopefully soon. And I would also, last but not least, thank my two beautiful colleagues, Yazan and Rimu, without whom this conversation wouldn't have happened. Thank you all and have a good night.
Bye.